bill at the end of private business public members, right? Orders of the day.
Battle item number 49, Order M193, second reading of Bill 193, an act to prohibit door-to-door sales of certain products. Mr. Baker.
The member from Etobicoke Centre.
I move second reading of Bill 193, an act to prohibit door-to-door sales of certain products.
Mr. Baker has moved second reading of Bill 193, an act to prohibit door-to-door sales of certain products pursuant to Standing Order 98. The member has 12 minutes for his presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm honoured to rise in the legislature today to speak about my private member's bill, Bill 193, an act to prohibit door-to-door sales of certain products. Before I begin, I'd just like to take a moment, Madam Speaker, to recognize a few of the people who are here today in support of the bill. I'm proud to have a number of constituents of mine from Etobicoke Centre with me here today. They're members of my Seniors Advisory Group. They're actually the ones who brought this issue forward and inspired me to work on this issue, and I'm thrilled to have them. We have with us a few folks, Harvey Pellegrini, and we have as well Marion Feltus. Thank you for joining us today. The bill is also the culmination of months of consultation and work with a range of organizations, particularly those advocating for consumers and those advocating for seniors. And so we have several representatives I wanted to introduce. Ken Whitehurst, who's the Executive Director of the Consumer Council of Canada. Dolly Guerrier, who's a member of the Council's Board of Directors. Thank you, Dolly, for coming. And Adina Lebo, who's the Chair of CARP Toronto. Thank you for coming, and thank you for all your support as well. You know, this bill got a lot of media coverage, Speaker, and I think in part because it concerns so many Ontarians across the province. There are a number of members of the media who I could thank, but one of them is here today. I just wanted to acknowledge Becky Coles, who's a producer with News Talk 1010. Thank you, Becky. And I also wanted to acknowledge a couple of members of my family who are here at important moments like this. Both my mom and dad are here, Miroslava Oleksiuk and Donald Baker. Thank you both for being here. And Madam Speaker, as you know, to put together a bill like this, you need a fantastic team. I have a fantastic group of staff that have worked on this bill. Sinead Anderson, who's my EA, Olivia Labonte, my OLIP intern, and Ashish Oberoi, my former LA. They did fantastic work on this. And I'd also like to thank members of all caucuses who advised me, who've given me their support. Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, every month I hold a Seniors Advisory Group meeting to hear from seniors in my community about their concerns. And at the initial meetings after I got elected, I heard what you would expect to hear about. I heard about health care issues, and I heard about transportation issues. But one of the issues I heard the most about was about consumer protection, and specifically I heard a lot about door-to-door sales. One constituent in particular once said to me, you know, all the issues you've discussed are important, but you need to do something about for the people who don't feel secure answering the doors to their own homes, who are being duped out of their limited savings. I started to hear story after story from seniors and other constituents who had been taken advantage of by coercive and misleading salespeople right on their own doorsteps, Madam Speaker, right in their own homes. There's one story in particular that really rang out, and I want to share this with the members of the legislature today. One day there was a woman, she's a member of my Seniors Advisory Group, had a knock at the door. She opened the door, and there was a man in an orange jacket. And as she looked out beyond him onto the street, she could see other people in orange jacket knocking at the doors of some of her neighbours. The gentleman said he was with the energy company and said that data showed that energy use was too high in the neighbourhood and that he needed to inspect her furnace because the furnace could be out of compliance. So he asked to inspect her furnace. She, of course, complied. He inspected the furnace and says it was out of compliance. But he had a solution for her. He said that if she paid $129 a month, that right away, and signed on the dotted line right there, that he could get this furnace replaced very, very quickly, and that, as it so happened, the Government of Ontario was offering a rebate of $1,300 for anyone who signed right away to get a new furnace. So she agreed to this. Afterwards, she realized that her previous furnace actually worked just fine, and that she shouldn't have signed this contract. And so the day after, she called the company, as she's allowed to do under law, under the cooling-off period, and asked to cancel the contract. As she was on the phone trying to cancel, they wouldn't allow her to cancel. And as she was on the phone, the installers came to install the new furnace. They took her perfectly fine furnace away, and they replaced it with a new one, and she started getting billed $129 a month, even though she was told, and she never got the rebate, of course, and even though she was told she'd be able to save on her energy bill so much to make up for the $129, that, of course, never happened. When she complained and complained and complained, the company eventually said to her, well, you know, we could give you a deal. You could buy the furnace we just installed for $9,000. The furnace that replaced a furnace that was perfectly fine and worked fine, she could pay $9,000 to keep. That was the deal the company offered her. This is all too common, Madam Speaker. this is just one example of the story that I've heard and I know other members have heard. So I decided that I had to do something to end this predatory practice, and so in March I started to consult with constituents, with organizations like those represented here, and started to look at the causes of the problem, the root causes of the problem. And what I learned is that Ontarians across Ontario continue to receive unwanted marketers at their door who use misleading, aggressive, and high-pressure sales tactics to entice people into bad contracts, to take advantage of consumers. And under the guise of saving consumers money, many dishonest marketers dupe consumers into contracts that are more expensive than they should be, have harsh cancellation fees, provide inferior products and services that don't work at all, or certainly don't work as advertised. And the problem is particularly concentrated in the sale and lease of air conditioners, water heaters, furnaces, and water treatment devices. These 4 products alone, Madam Speaker, cost consumers who reported their experiences to the Government of Ontario $3.2 million in 2015. Those are only the people who raise their concern with the government. The vast majority of people don't. So we can imagine that millions and millions of dollars people are being duped out of millions and millions of dollars every single year across our province. A good portion of those talked about misrepresentation. Others brought up issues such as partial or incomplete delivery of goods and services, billing disputes, difficulty in cancelling contracts, just like the story I just told you. And this is just an example of the challenges. These are just examples of the challenges people have faced across Ontario. And while this is an issue that touches people of all ages and all backgrounds, it's alarming to me to see how often door-to-door salespeople who use these tactics target people who are the most vulnerable. Seniors are misled. Seniors. Those with serious health issues are taken advantage of. I had somebody at the press conference when I introduced this bill, Madam Speaker, talk about her mother who has Alzheimer's, who was duped into a contract, and the company refused to cancel and continued to charge her. And many others are locked into contracts with no way out. To me, Madam Speaker, it is beyond reprehensible that there are people, that there are organizations, that there are businesses out there who make a living, who have a business model based on taking advantage of the most vulnerable people in our society. It's got to stop. And that is why I introduced Bill 193. If passed, the bill would ban the sale, lease, or rent of air conditioners, water heaters, furnaces, and water treatment devices at a person's home. It would also allow the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services to add products to this list if necessary. Speaker, I selected these products very carefully and very deliberately because these are the ones that have been prone to those aggressive, misleading, and coercive tactics that I was talking about, and the ones that we've received the most complaints about. If a contract is signed under the door, under this bill, what would happen is that it would be immediately void. But it was important to me that there be real consequences for those that don't comply, for companies who continue to try to sell people these products. And I believe that we need to send a strong message that this practice is unacceptable and needs to stop. So stiff penalties would be put in place for offenders who violate this ban, who violate the bill. Individual salespeople who violate the ban could be fined up to $2,000, per instance, and organizations caught breaking the ban would be subject to harsh penalties of up to $25,000. Again, we need to dissuade companies from pursuing these misleading and coercive practices. In addition to the contract being voided, the consumer would be entitled to any money paid under the contract, as well as the return or replacement of any product taken under the contract. So the consumer would not be out of pocket. Finally, if the company refused to abide by all of these requirements, did not pay the consumer back their money, and did not replace the product that was working, the consumer would have the option to take the company to court, and if successful, if the judge ruled in consumer's favour, they'd be entitled to receiving double of the amount owed plus legal fees. Too many companies are too eager to allow the consumer to go to court with them because they have the means to take them to court, and consumers are reluctant to do so. The goal here is to dissuade offending companies from doing just that. I also think it's important to strike the right balance. I come from a business background, and we want to protect Ontarians from coercive sales tactics, but we also want to ensure consumers have choice, that small businesses are still able to thrive, and that we, of course, do not limit the activities of charities or not-for-profit organizations. Let me be very clear. This does not impede on charities. It does not impede on community groups. It doesn't impede on people like Girl Guides who come sell cookies at your door, or the local boy or girl who wants to deliver the paper at your door. We're talking about only 4 product categories where we know there are consistently coercive practices being used. This bill, to me, Madam Speaker, strikes the right balance. And I'm pleased to note that I've received support from across the province, from all corners of the province. First of all, I have to tell you that when we introduced the bill, my constituency office got hundreds of calls from ridings across this province. I bet I got a call from every riding across Ontario in my constituency office. I'm also pleased that I had the support of a number of key groups, including the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, known as CARP, who's represented here today, the Public Interest Advocacy Centre, and the Consumers Council of Canada, who's also represented here today. I thank you for your advocacy, and I thank you for your input, and I thank you for your support. I'm also pleased to note that a number of municipalities have passed motions supporting the bill, Madam Speaker, and urging a provincial ban on door-to-door sales of products in the home services sector. They include, and this is not an exhaustive list, the City of Brampton, Hamilton, Markham, Mississauga, Oshawa, Pickering, the Township of North Dundas, the Township of Wellington North, and the City of Toronto, amongst others, Madam Speaker. And to me, this reflects the fact that this is a concern to people north to south, east to west across Ontario, and it's not just an urban problem, it's not just a suburban problem, it's not just a rural problem, it's a problem across Ontario. This issue has been covered widely by the media. I alluded to that earlier, and I think this highlights again that it's an issue that concerns people across the province. It's not just media in Toronto that covered this. It's not just News Talk 1010 or CBC Radio that I talked about earlier. It's Global News, it's CP24, it's the Etobicoke Guardian, it's Metro News, it's the Caledon Enterprise, it's the Newmarket Era, it's the Mississauga News, it's the Oshawa Express, and I could go on and on. This to me is the Aurora Banner. Thank you very much, the member for Newmarket Aurora. This is a reflection of the fact. This is a concern to many. And, Madam Speaker, I had a wonderful support from an MPP who you know well, Sue Wong, who provided me with this. Finally, we have a bill that will provide further protection to Ontarians, especially the vulnerable seniors who are regularly harassed and pressured into signing a contract that they don't comprehend. The elimination of this type of sale will provide some security and protection to all Ontarians. In my riding of Scarborough Region Court, I received at least one complaint a week from this unethical sale. The salesperson targets Chinese residents, especially the frail seniors, into signing a contract they don't understand. Current law prevents companies from activating the contract prior to the cooling-off period, and I heard cases in my riding where the overzealous employee moved both the furnace and the air conditioner prior to the cooling-off period. I mean, this is just one example of many MPPs who have spoken up on this issue in support. Consumers have spoken, advocacy groups have spoken, and now municipalities have spoken, MPPs have spoken. It's time to take action. I started my remarks by sharing that I was inspired by my seniors advisory group, by seniors in my community who raised this issue with me. I have heard from too many seniors, too many constituents of all ages who have been taken advantage of by coercive and misleading salespeople right at their own doorstep, right in their own home. I know we've all heard those stories. It is beyond reprehensible to me that some organizations make a living, have a business model that's based on taking advantage of vulnerable people. We have to take action to protect Ontarians and end these predatory practices. Madam Speaker, I ask all members of this House for their support. The seniors in my community, constituents and consumers across Ontario deserve no less. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further debate. The member from Niagara West Glenbrook.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and for all that applause from my colleagues. You know, recently a 26-year-old autistic man purchased $1,100 worth of cosmetics in the Penn Centre in Niagara, where I'm from, a retail store. The autistic man was informed that he had bad bags under his eyes and had sensitive skin. The store clerks, who I'm sure got commission from this, asked the man to sign a piece of paper stating that he bought the product of his own accord and understood the sale to be final. I bring this case up because it's one example of how pressure tactics across the retail environment, whether brick and glass buildings or door-to-door, can at times attract unscrupulous salespeople who do bad business practices. But the Members' Bill doesn't cover this area, nor does it cover Internet sales. And I say, Speaker, if we were to ban every type of sale or business transaction that had an unscrupulous salesperson, not a single product or service could be bought or sold in the province. I commend the member for his ambition. It's certainly a very ambitious bill, but in my view, too far. We have to be careful in the use of legislative power to eliminate somebody's livelihood or business altogether. Government is a sledgehammer. It is a blunt force weapon. And I think you have to be careful when you wield it, Madam Speaker. Now, look, I'm spoiled. I live out in the country. My drive is 500 meters long. I've had 2 door-to-door visits my time there. One was a councillor running for mayor, and the fact that she made that 1-kilometer trip, so I voted for her. Joanne Hamilton. The other were Jehovah's Witnesses, so I joined the faith. I'll deliver literature to all your desks a bit later on. I'm kidding about that one, Madam Speaker. didn't join the faith, but I was impressed by their tenacity. But the view I have is I am concerned that this bill portrays in members' rhetoric seniors as entirely vulnerable individuals who are unable to do the research to stand up for themselves, to say a simple no thank you. I see seniors in a much more empowered and positive and stronger light than the members' comments. Let's not forget that direct selling is a massive business. It's $2 billion every year. Ontario accounts for 38% of that $2 billion here in our province, Madam Speaker. And an outright across-the-board ban on these services, and the member would allow that through regulation, as including knife sales or, to the point of ridiculousness, Girl Guide cookies. Maybe the mint one's not the chocolate and vanilla. But you do give the power of regulation to a minister to ban any kind of door-to-door sales. Don't shake your head. It's in the bill, and you said that during your speech. Your regulatory authority gives to any good or service to be banned by a minister without coming back to the legislature for debate. I think that is far too aggressive and unwise. Let me give you an example. Connectico is a Canadian company that sells home water treatment systems. It requires a professional to go into a consumer's home, usually invited to an agreed meeting. The home's plumbing must be inspected, the homeowner is educated on how the product will function, and then a deal is forged or not. The member's bill would ban that type of service, a legitimate, successful company that's quite popular in our province. You walk into Costco, and I'm a proud Costco member, and you walk out, on both sides of the aisle as you leave, picture this in your mind, there's a whole range of Costco services, which will then come to your house and fix your deck, change your plumbing, or some of the things mentioned as bill heater water systems. The member would ban those in their entirety as well, either through regulation or in total. Your bill's language, I'll tell you, is very, very wide open, and I think quite dangerous, that anything that is part of a sell, lease, rent, or offer to sell, lease, or rent a product listed in subsection 2 to a consumer in person to the consumer's home. So Home Depot, Walmart, Costco, Connectico, do you really want to ban those services that are increasingly popular and I think highly legitimate? Or do you want to take more of a scalpel to the truly unscrupulous individuals? You know, I had the pleasure of serving as a consumer minister back in 2002. We brought forward a 10-day cooling-off period. If you want to extend that, I'm happy to debate that, but that gave a chance to get out of contracts after 10 days. We had significant sentences and fines, up to $500,000 for a corporation or $50,000 for a business. I think that's a much better way to approach this issue than the sledgehammer of banning all these businesses potentially and treating seniors as unable to advocate for themselves and make wise decisions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Further debate. The member from Timiskaming Cochrane.
Thank you, Speaker. It's always an honor to be able to stand in this House and today to speak on M193, door-to-door sales prohibition. I'd like to start off by saying I am full support of this bill. And this isn't the first type of this bill that's been brought to the House, because our member from Kenora Rainy River also brought a bill forward trying to ban door-to-door sales of electricity contracts, which in our part of the world is they prey upon seniors, they prey upon the people who aren't equipped to know what's really what. And I know that for a fact, Speaker, because recently I had to help move my mom. She was living on her own, and she moved into a retirement home. So we helped clean up her affairs for her home. And lo and behold, my mom was paying twice as much for electricity as she should have, because my mom had signed a door-to-door electricity contract without my knowledge. That happens all the time. And we should have moved on this before.
My wife once did.
My dad, often I quote my dad in this House. He would turn over in his grave if he knew that. But, and he once told me, he says, if you don't have to go to the store to buy it, you don't need it. You know, no one's going to show up at your door. Sometimes people would say, politicians as well, no one's going to show up to your door and with the great idea that if you hadn't thought about it this morning to buy it, all of a sudden at 10 o'clock you have to buy it because it's the best thing that's ever happened to you. That's just not true. You know, and that's an issue. And I have another personal story. I'm not going to mention the company. I have 3 daughters, and all 3 of them worked for the same high-pressure door-to-door sales type company. Shame. And 2 of my daughters made a lot of money doing it, and one was no good at it at all. But they trained specifically how to do this. They train specifically where to pick, who to pick, and there's certain markers that they say, oh, this one's kind of a waste of time. This one, and it's very, very specific. They put time into this. And again, it's very sophisticated. It's not the same as going into a store or even looking on, if you're going to look on the internet to buy something, you are still taking the initiative to go look yourself. And that's the difference to me. And that's why I think this bill is a step in the right direction. As the member for Kenora Rainy River with electricity retailers, there's all kinds of these scams going on, for lack of a better word, all across the province. And I know when I first got elected 5 years ago, our constituency offices in my riding were busier breaking electricity contracts than anything else. And then it morphed into trying to figure out Hydro One billing, but that's another whole story. But
I was trying to beat the government away from them.
But electricity contracts were, and these were, lots of times you'd have to call yourself and say, okay, and then they'd back off. But they were very, very aggressive, unbelievably aggressive. There's a scam right now going on where people call you up and they're with Revenue Canada, and you haven't paid enough tax, and that you need to give them your credit card number. That's going on as we speak. And again, when you say, well, that's crazy, and I'm not going to do it, but there's my mom would. My mom would. And I shouldn't have said that because maybe now they're going to phone her. But that is the issue we're dealing with, and I think that's what this bill is trying to attack. That's what the bill that the member from Kenora Rainy River is trying to attack. But I've got to bring one thing to the end of my remarks here.
Carry on.
End of my remarks. No, I'm about done.
Oh, jeez. Really?
This is a private member's bill, and I commend the member for bringing it. But this isn't, the other side isn't the private member's government. They are the government, and they can move on that.
Yep.
They can move on that much quicker than a private member can. And I urge the government to take this initiative, and whether it's got Mr. Baker's name on it or anyone, it doesn't matter to me. And I don't think it matters to the member. But it matters to us all that people in this province are treated fairly and with respect, and that they aren't purposely gouged. And we all know this is going on. I see members on the other side of the House nodding. I see members on this side of the House, some of them nodding. We all know this is going on. The government has within their grasp, within their power, to do it. They could have done it a year ago. They could have done it 2 years ago. They could have done it 5 years ago. I believe they've been in power, correct me if I'm wrong, for a dozen years.
Way too long.
So, my color commentator here. But I urge the government, there's one thing that we have to move on, because they are, when they prey on seniors, they prey on low-income people. I know when lots of times you have single moms, and they're really busy just trying to hold on to their life, taking care of their kids, and someone shows up, oh, have we got a great deal on this, and this is going to save you all this money? And you know what? They don't have time to read the fine print, and it looks good, and they sign, and all of a sudden, they're trapped. We all know this is going on. I commend that member. I hope that he can push his government to finally act on this important issue.
Further debate. I recognize the member from Davenport.
Thank you, Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise in the House today to speak to Bill 193, Door-to-Door Sales Prohibition Sales Act 2016. I want to start off by congratulating and thanking the member from Etobicoke Centre for introducing this bill, a bill, Speaker, that I fully support. If passed, this bill would introduce legislation that would ban the sale, lease or rent of specific products at a consumer's home. Under the proposed legislation, air conditioners, water heaters, furnaces, and water treatment devices would be prohibited. And a provision would also be included, allowing the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services to add more products to this list if necessary. And Speaker, if a contract were to violate the proposed ban, the contract would be found to be void, and the offender could be fined substantive amounts ranging from $500 to $2,000 for individual offenders and from $5,000 to $25,000 for companies that were found to violate the law. Fine, Speaker, that would increase with the increase in the number of offences. There has been quite a bit of attention given to this bill since it was introduced by the member from Etobicoke Centre, and as he so rightfully said, has received quite a bit of media attention as well. But, Speaker, this is not a new issue or a recent issue. I recall knocking on doors in my riding of Davenport in 2011 and hearing about the frustration and embarrassment of constituents that felt as though they had been taken for a ride by door-to-door salespeople. And I heard about the same frustration and embarrassment again when I knocked on doors in 2014. And since being elected Speaker, I continue to receive calls, emails, and constituents in my office urging that something be done to address door-to-door sales. So I am pleased with the introduction of this bill by my colleague, MPP Baker, member for Etobicoke Centre, that, if passed, would help tackle the issue by banning door-to-door sales of products. While this is an issue that goes across all ages, it's alarming to see how often door-to-door salespeople target those who may be more vulnerable, take advantage of them, force them to buy products or services at skyrocketing rates, and lock them into contracts with monthly payments and no way out. As you know, Speaker, I represent the riding of Davenport, which is home to a large senior population and home to many immigrants and newcomers. It is home to many who speak English as a second language and home to many new homeowners, all of whom are particularly vulnerable. It is many of these people that fall prey to the unwanted salespeople or marketers at their door, marketers that use misleading, aggressive, and high-pressure sales tactics to entice innocent Ontarians into bad contracts that take advantage of consumers. But, Speaker, if this bill is to pass, there would be no room for bad contracts or locked contracts. The bill would include additional penalties as well. If a consumer has already paid for the product, a refund for the total cost would need to be issued. If the product purchased needed to be replaced, the seller would have to reimburse any costs incurred in replacing the product. If a refund is not issued, the consumer may take legal action and would be entitled to receive double the amount paid under the contract. And if legal costs are awarded by the court, the legislation would also ensure that it covers the incurred legal costs. If Bill 193 is passed, the consumer will be protected from any cancellation charges or any other penalties if the contract is found to be void, and no further legal action can be taken against the consumer as a result of cancelling the void contract. The proposed bill has been welcomed by many non-profit and charity organizations or groups, some of which are here today, and I will name them: the Public Interest Advocacy Centre, the Consumers Council of Canada, and the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, better known as CARP. Wade Poziomka, Director of Policy and Litigation at CARP, is quoted as saying, and I'll start the quote, "The measures proposed are stringent, but ultimately necessary to protect our members, some of whom have been taken advantage of time and time again by putting their trust in those who are undeserving." End quote. Speaker, since the introduction of this bill, I have had a petition in my office that has been signed by many of my constituents in Davenport requesting that this bill pass. My constituents feel passionate about this bill and urge me to support it. So, Speaker, I fully support this bill and encourage all members of this House to do the same so that we can pass the bill through committee and protect those vulnerable to the predatory practices of door-to-door salespeople and marketers. Once again, I thank the member from Etobicoke Centre for bringing this bill forward. Thank you, Speaker.
Further debate. I recognize the member from Stormont, Douglas, South Glengarry.
Yep. Thank you, Speaker. You got it right again. I'm proud to rise to speak today on Bill 193, an act to prohibit door-to-door sales of certain products. And I'm glad that my colleague on this side of the House talked about some of the issues. We're talking legislation about major items, and the definition of major items, of course, comes under some scrutiny, and especially when something with the passage of this bill, opens things up for much more than we're actually talking about today, and that's dangerous. Door-to-door sales is a very large industry in this province. Is used for lots of different roles. You look at businesses that are starting out, they may not be ready just yet to open up a retail outlet. The cost of operating a business and office in this province has become very expensive under this government. We look at the payroll taxes. Maybe they're not ready to hire somebody yet. You start out, you don't have a lot of capital. Cost of heating in this province is about to skyrocket as the government is either going to abolish formally the use of natural gas or just tax it out of existence. They like the tax idea because they do get that money back. So there are different ways of doing things, and we really have to look at business in this province that is very challenging today. If you're into a building, you likely, your property taxes are the second highest in North America. Promoting electricity, of course, that's the highest in North America, and it makes it very hard to make a profit. I know my dad back in the early '60s for the Idea Supply Management Committee sold seed door to door to local farmers. Will that be outlawed? I mean, that could be a major investment to farmers these days. I mean, corn is generally sold by distributors to go door to door, and the corn contract's up around for the seed $100,000 easily or more for a product each year. So those are things that we should be looking at trying to help people. There's no question there needs to be restrictions. I know they brought in Bill 55. I think that went quite far, especially with hot water heaters. We were looking at the ability to put a cooling off period, 20 days for hot water heaters. I guess the member doesn't feel that legislation was effective. But outright bans, taking away people's employment, is very dangerous. And we see that every year our bankruptcies are going up, and the last thing we want to do is see them legislated in place, and that's what this bill will do. And, there's lots of things, as I say, we can work at educating the customer, giving them more rights, but outright bans are dangerous. And I think that we need to move forward, work with on the education, work on different roles of protecting the consumer, and not just on major appliance, but on many things. A protected consumer, an informed consumer, is always the best route. It allows for flexibility. It allows for the industry to grow and hopefully get large enough that they have their own retail outlets. And especially in the trades, very hard to go out and purchase a large business. People like to start small and build big, and that's kind of the history of this province. So thanks very much for the opportunity to speak today, Speaker.
Further debate. The member from Timmins, James Bay.
Well, Mr. Speaker, or Mrs. Madam Speaker, my God, I better look over there next time. I just want to put a couple of things on the record. Generally, of course, we're in support of this bill, and as mentioned by my good friend and colleague, the member from Timiskaming Cochrane, Sarah Campbell, the member from Kenora Rainy River, has actually passed such a bill at second reading. It's actually been in committee where we've had some hearing dates. Certainly the bill in the spirit of what Mr. Baker is doing is one that I think we can all support in this House. I would hope, although I do think there is a good Conservative friend, colleague of mine, who's going to vote against. And I kind of understand his argument, but I can't say I entirely agree, is that we do live in a democracy and people have the right to exercise their rights, and if their business is going to door, I understand that sort of charter kind of approach to it. But the problem is that there is sort of the theoretical and then there's a practical. And I think certainly the member from Timiskaming Cochrane, but others have raised it as well, is that it is a bit of an art to get out there and to target certain groups of people to be able to take advantage of them because they're less able to say no. And we saw that, as the member pointed out, when it came to the electricity marketing, that there was a huge amount of outcry on the part of the seniors community for people who signed themselves in and locked themselves in to some pretty expensive electricity contracts that they were stuck in having to pay. And it actually took members of the Assembly coming into this House and raising it day after day in question period and every opportunity, that finally, I believe it was the Conservative government, or it might have been the Liberal government, I don't remember. It was one of the two, actually brought in a bill to somewhat regulate those people because it was really getting to be a problem. I remember, as other members in this House, and I'm sure the member from Niagara
Falls.
Just Niagara Falls? Okay. I don't know. Well, I'm sorry. Like Niagara, and then there's Falls. Like, I just want to warn you guys, if I ever decide to run for Speaker, you better make sure to test me for names of ridings and people, because I won't do too well. But my point is that we all get the same thing, where, people really have been put in a hard spot. I always remember this one particular case I had. She was an elderly person whose husband had died. She didn't have much of an income other than the survivor's CPP and the old age. And the difference that did on her gas bill, and she did her hydro bill as well, ate into the amount of money that she had to pay for medication, to pay her copay. So when she went to get her copay to start off her drug coverage for the year, she needed to pay at the time, I think it was $100 or something, and she didn't have the money. And was quite hard-pressed and was worried about what that was going to do to her health. So we worked something out with the pharmacist, and I got to thank a particular pharmacy, and I'm not going to name them because it would be unfair, because he may not like that, but he actually waived it and allowed her to get her prescription done. And I think he probably paid it, is more than likely what he did. So, thank God for that. But the point is, it was all because of this type of action. In the last couple of minutes I want to put on the record, people should understand the process for private members' bills. I would imagine this bill will get passed at second reading. We'll find out when we vote later. I don't see why we wouldn't. But the process by which to pass a bill is one that's very dependent on your own caucus. Because the way it works is, normally we try to negotiate at the end of session, spring and fall, a package of 1, 2, or 3 private members' bills from each caucus, and the process is your caucus has to put it forward. So I would argue, or not argue, but I would suggest to Mr. Baker, I don't know the riding, so I have to use the name. I did it now, so I beg forgiveness. What he should really do is start working on his own House leader and his own House team to make sure that his bill is one that's picked. Because if it's not picked, we don't have a say. We have nothing to do with it. So often what happens is that members say, oh, well, it's the opposition that's holding up my bill, and that's the only reason, or it's the government that's holding up my bill, and that's the only reason it's not going forward. No. Your own caucus has to put your bill forward, and then the other 2 caucuses have to support it. So you have 2 thresholds that you got to get by. The first one is your own caucus has to pick the bill as one that it's willing to go forward with, and number 2, you need to make sure that you have the support of the other 2 caucuses. I don't see us as having a problem with your bill, so I'm almost prepared at this point to say this I don't think will be an issue for New Democrats. But I also want to end on the point that the member for Timiskaming Cochrane made. At any time, the government could stand and introduce its own bill. And maybe that's what the member is trying to do here, because often members will introduce private members' bills as a way of raising the issue so that hopefully the government will bring a bill. And I can tell you, the member from Nickel Belt, France Gélinas, has been very effective at bringing private members' bills in the House where the government actually moves forward and moves on the initiative themselves. And that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with it. A good idea, it doesn't matter where it comes from and who act on it, is still a good idea. And if it's passed at the end of the day, that's a good thing. So I look forward to this bill passing and hopefully moving on this particular initiative.
Further debate. The member from Kingston and Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I have to say that I'm very, very pleased to rise today and offer my support to the second reading of Bill 193, the Door-to-Door Sales Prohibition Act. The first thing I would like to do, though, is I would like to acknowledge my colleague, MPP Baker, for his advocacy for seniors. We talk a lot in this legislature about gender parity, and this young man spends one meeting every single month with his seniors advocacy group, and I just really would like to acknowledge him for that, and everyone to give him a round of applause. As the member for Etobicoke Centre has stated in his remarks, predatory door-to-door sales are an issue all across this province, including my riding of Kingston and the Islands. I've also heard about these challenges that seniors have faced in my community when I was working in a federal constituency office, and we would have seniors who would come into the office in commonly problematic sales: furnaces, air conditioners, water heaters, and water treatment systems. It also encompasses other problematic items that may become apparent down the road. And no, it is not going to encompass Girl Guide cookies or charities. So don't be mistaken about that or misled. I lend my full support to this bill, Madam Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
I thank the honourable member from Kingston and the Islands, and now return the floor to the member from Thornhill.
Thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to rise today and to speak on Bill 193, Door-to-Door Sales Prohibition Act. Well, we've heard a lot of very interesting arguments up till now, and the premise of this bill is that there are too often people who have buyer's regret when door-to-door salespeople come to their door with high-pressure tactics, sign now or you're not going to get this deal, and that sort of thing. I think we've all been in the position where somebody's come to our door with a clipboard, looking very official, and we have felt kind of uncomfortable. Even experienced people like us who should know better can sometimes be taken in by sales tactics. But I don't know that the answer is to ban door-to-door sales, because the same high-pressure tactics could be used in malls, in restaurants, on the street. It's very easy to figure out where people are hanging out and to go after them if you're stopped from going to their doors. Of course, it's more convenient and it will make things more difficult, but it doesn't mean you're banning door-to-door sales just because you stop people from going to the door. We're all quite aware of that. I think that the issue is that very often we have people who are able to answer a door but may be suffering from maybe they're a bit special needs, if I can say that. Maybe they're getting a little bit older and their faculties aren't what they once were. And we can't always be watching everybody, and we can't always be protecting everybody. So I think that maybe we need to look at something else. Maybe we have to look at stickers on the doors that say no solicitation. If you come to this door and somebody signs a contract, that we will be absolved from that. Maybe there's something that we can work on that sends a message to people coming to the door that it won't be tolerated. I don't know how that could really work. I think that really public education is the best answer for these kinds of things, that we're not really teaching our kids.
Etobicoke Centre's private member's bill that seeks to ban door-to-door sales. This is an important piece of legislation, in my opinion, because, as we heard, if passed, it would ban the sale, lease or rent of specific products at a consumer's home. And Mr. Speaker, I do join the group of concerned residents and advocacy groups in support of this bill. This legislation takes important steps to protect those who have been subjected to aggressive and coercive sales tactics. The riding of York South-Weston, which I have the privilege of representing, has a high number of seniors and also of new immigrants and people that speak English as a second language who are vulnerable to this kind of devious sales tactics. And when I say devious, Mr. Speaker, anybody could fall prey of these tactics. I had someone who knocked on my door and said that they worked for the government of Ontario. Now, I knew better, but there are people that are new to Canada, and that could be very intimidating to them. They will let that person in. Time and time again, my constituency office has had to come to the rescue for a number of constituents who have fallen prey to fraudulent sales representatives. Mr. Speaker, it is time for this practice to end. And I would like to demonstrate the significance of this legislation by providing just a few examples of how my constituents have been affected by these unfair schemes. For example, one of my constituents was targeted by a company who promised to install a new furnace and AC. The sales representative urged the constituent to sign the contract right there in front of him and threatened that if he didn't sign immediately, he would lose the opportunity to receive the government's heating and cooling incentive. The constituent signed the contract and was told that someone would install the unit the next day. Fortunately, the next day, he decided to call my constituency office. We promptly contacted the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, who advised us that this contractor was not on the list of participating contractors in the heating and cooling incentive. So as a result, the constituent immediately cancelled the contract, and luckily there was no financial loss in this specific case. However, not all of my constituents and people across Ontario have been so fortunate, Mr. Speaker, to survive without being robbed of hundreds of dollars. In another instance, for example, I was contacted by the son of an elderly couple who was approached in their home by a sales representative of an HVAC company who inspected their 8.5-year-old furnace, which was supposedly installed by the same company in the past. The company was told that the pressure switch and the flame sensor were not working, and to pay $600 right on the spot in order to fix it. The next day, the furnace was not working. The same representative came back, could not get the furnace to work, and advised the elderly couple that they needed a new furnace and took the old one with him. So this couple was left without a furnace, robbed of dollars, hundreds of dollars, and we had to contact again the ministry to fix the issue. Mr. Speaker, I feel this bill is really important for all of us and all the consumers in Ontario, and therefore I support it wholeheartedly.
Thank the honourable member from York South-Weston, and now return for final response to the member from Etobicoke Centre.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And I'd like to thank the member who spoke, the member for Niagara West Glanbrook, Timiskaming Cochrane, Davenport, Stormont, Dundas South Glengarry, Timmins James Bay, Kingston and the Islands, Thornhill, and York South-Weston. And I'd like to thank the government caucuses and the NDP caucus for their support. I do want to take the remaining time to just address some of the points that were raised from the PC caucus members who were in opposition to the bill. First of all, there was a point about seniors being empowered, that education is a tool that can be used to address this problem. Education is part of the solution, there's no question. Education on its own has demonstrated itself not to be effective enough, and that's really why I brought this bill forward. There are many measures that have been taking place to educate people, and even the most educated and knowledgeable, and even people who we wouldn't consider vulnerable, have fallen prey to these tactics. I had a professional salesperson tell me that he got duped once by a salesperson that came to his door. So the idea that we can educate people to prevent this, I think, is not accurate. It can help, but we need to take more strong measures, and that's why I've done this. There's a comment about it going too far, that the door-to-door sales industry is large, creates a lot of jobs. I don't think that this is going to impact a lot of business. I think businesses will have to adapt. They'll have to change, those who require the door-to-door method to sell. But there are other mechanisms to sell that won't materially impact their business. I used to be in business. I've run that assessment from my own perspective. I think this is something that most businesses could accommodate. So I think it's a balanced approach. There was a talk about a risk to Girl Guide cookies and anything like that. First of all, there's only 4 product categories that are named here. They're the ones where we've had millions of dollars of complaints on at the government, and fraud and misleading and predatory practices. The government would have the power under this bill to add additional product categories, but as with anything, they'd have to be very careful, and I can only imagine the outrage if any government of any political stripe tried to outlaw the sale of Girl Guide cookies. So I'm not particularly concerned about that. And there were talk about the fact that we can sell in other places. At the home is where people are the most vulnerable, and that's why they fall.
I thank the honourable member from Etobicoke Centre for a submission. Indeed, all members on Bill 193. Now move, and I mentioned we will be dealing with that as per protocol at the end of private members' public business. I now call for orders of the day.
Ballot item number 50, Order M211, second reading of Bill 211, an act to amend the Brain Tumor Awareness Month Act 2001. Mr. Ballard.
The member from Market Aurora.
I move second reading of Bill 211, an act to amend the Brain Tumor Awareness Month Act 2001.
Mr. Ballard has moved second reading of Bill 211, an act to amend the Brain Tumor Awareness Month Act 2001. Pursuant to Standing Order 98, the member has 12 minutes for his presentation. The member for Newmarket Aurora.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honoured to be able to rise and speak to my private member's bill, Bill 211, the Brain Tumor Awareness Month Amendment Act. If passed, this bill will proclaim the month of May as Brain Tumor Awareness Month. This is not new ground, Ms. Speaker. Currently, October is designated by the province as Brain Tumor Awareness Month. But by designating May, we will align Ontario with both British Columbia and the United States to create a North American Brain Tumor Awareness Month. I encourage all provinces to adopt a similar designation. This joint cooperative coalition will create greater awareness of and support for this cause. It's important to remember and to recognize this Awareness Month is just the beginning of what needs to be done to address this terrible disease, a disease that impacts the lives of thousands of individuals and families each and every day in Ontario and across the province. I'd like to thank a few key people for their support and guidance during the identification and creation of this bill. Amy Mathias, the Digital Community Engagement Coordinator from Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada, Maureen Daniels, a board member also from the Foundation, Charles Mott, a brain tumor survivor from my riding of Newmarket Aurora, and Ben Diplock, a clinical research coordinator at Sunnybrook Research Institute, who's also a brain tumor survivor. And I can say, as an aside, Madam Speaker, that I've known Ben since he was just a young boy. He grew up on the same street that I grew up on in King City, and my parents knew him and his sister and his parents quite well, and they kept me updated as Ben moved through his struggle with brain tumor, and ultimately a fantastic victory. I was honoured to have these advocates and survivors to Queen's Park to speak at my press conference last Thursday to launch the first reading of this bill. I was able to hear firsthand the struggles these survivors have overcome to be where they are today. I would also like to welcome two representatives from the Brain Tumor Foundation. With us today, Tracy Jones, the National Director of Programs and Services, and also Susan Ripers, who is a research specialist at Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada. Welcome to Queen's Park. Brain tumors are not an issue that typically receive a great deal of attention from the public. The goal of this bill is to start that conversation about brain tumor awareness, and to do that all year long, but specifically to kick it off each May. We know that this is an illness that can affect anyone. The brain is the most important organ in the body. It controls our five senses, as well as the ability to speak and move. Brain tumors are surprisingly common, and symptoms can be subtle. Every day, Madam Speaker, 27 Canadians hear the words, "You have a brain tumor." An estimated 55,000 people across Canada live with brain tumors. One of these individuals was Evan Leversage. Evan was from the small Ontario community of St. George near Bradford. Evan was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. In December of 2015, doctors told Evan's family that they were unsure if Evan would live to see Christmas, and perhaps they should celebrate early. You'll probably remember the community's reaction. It came together in an outpouring of love and support for Evan and his family to ensure that Evan celebrated that Christmas. An estimated 7,000 people joined this celebration, more than double the population of St. George. Supporters lined Evans Street, cheering as he passed by homes lit by Christmas lights, decorations, and even fake snow. The photos of Evan sitting next to Santa in his sleigh with a smile on his face were magical. Sadly, Evan died December the 6th of last year. Brain tumors also impact the strongest in our community. Madam Speaker, Newmarket Hurricanes hockey player Kevin Lord died in 2006 of brain cancer. Kevin was young, strong, and fit. He was a dedicated athlete, teammate, and friend to many in both the hockey and ball hockey communities. Each year, the Newmarket Hurricanes and Ontario Junior League hockey team holds the Battle of York to benefit a benefit hockey game that pits the Aurora Tigers against the Newmarket Hurricanes. In memory of Kevin, a portion of the proceeds of the game go to Southlake Regional Hospital's Cancer Centre. To date, this event has raised $50,000. Top of mind when we think about brain tumours, perhaps, is the announcement recently that the frontman for the tragically hip, Gord Downey, has an incurable form of brain cancer. We were all stunned. Gord's family, friends, and fans have rallied around him as he vows one final tour with the band. It will be a remarkable tour. Madam Speaker, this is personal. My family has been touched by brain tumours. My wonderful father-in-law, Marvin Green,